So the book is called Switchling. Chapter 1 is called Moon. Beth looked out from her window seat into the dark night. She wasn't expecting to see anything interesting, but felt reluctant to go to bed. In Beth's opinion, nothing interesting ever happened in the village of Fairhaven. But this time she was puzzled by what she saw. Gravel, her cat, was sitting on the sundial in the middle of the lawn, staring up at the night sky. He seemed to be waiting for something. But what? No sooner had she thought this than the veil of clouds parted, revealing an almost full moon. A slanting moonbeam shone down on the cat's grey fur. At once he began opening and closing his mouth, as if he was speaking words, but Beth was not close enough to hear what they were. Carefully, so as not to make a sound, she eased open her bedroom window to listen. But what happened next drove the scene unexplained from her mind. A stocky tortoiseshell tom jumped over the garden wall and strode angrily across the lawn, planting himself at the foot of the sundial. The small grey cat arched his back and stared down at the intruder. Except for the wind and the sycamore, there was silence as the two cats fixed their hostile glares upon each other. "Gravel!" Beth shouted, ignoring the chilling draught. Although his ears twitched, he was too intent on his enemy to take any notice. Tomcat crouched to spring, but anticipating him, Gravel made a flying leap across the grass, bounding up onto the low roof that sloped beneath Beth's window. There was just enough time for her to move aside as he hurdled the windowsill onto the seat below. Quickly she closed the window, her heart racing, checking the moonlit garden. In the safety of the bedroom, both girl and cat dropped to the floor in relief. After a few moments, Gravel got up and walked over to sit on her lap. "That's the third time this week," said Beth, smoothing his bristling fur. She thought of that ginger cat who had sprung at Gravel a few days earlier outside Home Farm, only to be thwarted by its broom-wielding owner. Then there was the cowardly white one that had hissed at him from behind the safety of its ground floor window. It was rare to see other cats fight in the tranquil village of Fairhaven, but when they did, it was always Gravel whom they attacked. Now he lay calmly resting his head on Beth's lap, but she was still worried. "I don't understand why it keeps happening. Why are they all against you?" The cat gave a mew, both sad and resigned, but then it had been this way ever since she had known him. Beth checked his legs and back, but found no injuries, only the familiar ridge near his left paw, where the hair stood up and the skin felt bumpy underneath. She had never known how it had got that way. Gravel hadn't always been her cat, and it seemed to her that she was his more than he was hers, as if he had chosen her. Beth's mind followed a well-worn route back to when the nameless cat first appeared in Ward Cottage 2 years earlier, not long after her 9th birthday. She had been watching television in the living room when she heard a startled "Oh!" from the passage. Getting up to find out what was happening, she saw her mother standing completely still, looking down at the doormat, where the blue eyes of the cat were gazing steadily back up at her. "How did it get in?" her mother asked Beth. "I don't know." On seeing Beth, it quickly got up. Unlike the other cats in the village who sidled confidently up to strangers expecting to be stroked, this one had run straight past her, past the telephone table and up the stairs. As Beth followed, she saw it dash through the open door of her bedroom and under the bed, where it curled up and closed its eyes, laying claim to the spot. Voices came from downstairs. "Philip, please get that cat out of the house," Beth's mum said to her dad in a shrill tone. She was a little afraid of cats and mice and spiders. "I'm sure it will take itself back to wherever it came from soon enough, Bev," he replied, trying to sound soothing, but the cat didn't. It lay sleeping under Beth's bed for a day and a night. Beth's dad put some milk in a bowl to tempt it out, but but without success. Beth stroked it in the morning and evening before bedtime, but it slept on. On the second day, Beverly went to the village shop and paid 15 pence to put a card in the window. Lost cat found, Ward Cottage, High Street, it said, but to her disappointment, no one had claimed it. She had never really agreed to keep the cat. It just made its home there, sleeping under Beth's bed. Soon the small grey cat started going out at night and sometimes wouldn't come back for days at a time. Back in her bedroom, Beth turned her thoughts to the day just past. I sat next to Sharon in English today, she told Gravel, who made what sounded like a questioning mew. She was telling me about her dog, Mona. Beth sighed and scrunched one of her brown ringlets thoughtfully. I don't know if we'll ever be real friends, though. She's never invited me to her house, and if she comes here, Mum's bound to make one of her weird experiments for dinner. Beth was glad to see that Gravel's fur was smooth now, his breathing calm, and his eyes closing drowsily. With great care, she moved her legs from under him and went to get ready for bed. The next evening before dinner, Mrs. Falvey asked Beth, "Can you take this next door?" holding out a warm plastic box. Beth knew this wasn't a real question and took it. She risked climbing over the waist-high wall that divided the two pathways of the houses, something Miss Priscott had to talk to her about before. By daylight, you could have seen that Ward Cottage and Beacon House were built from the same lichen-speckled golden stone as the rest of the village, and ancient wooden beams supported their uneven walls and floors. Yet beyond this, their characters were quite different. Though not the largest in the village, Beacon House was grander in its proportions than Beth's home, and settled back from the street behind a well-tended garden. Although its pale turquoise front door stood proudly facing the street, Beth approached Miss Priscott's side door, where its owner admitted visitors. Softly tapping the door knocker so as not to startle the old lady, Beth waited, hoping that she wouldn't ask about the birthday gifts that lay unread in her wardrobe. These came from her neighbour's many well-dusted shelves, from which Beth was invited to choose among the old and very dull-looking books each year. After a few minutes shivering outside, Miss Priscott opened the door, smiled, and took the box that Beth held out to her. Her wrinkled face was the pale brown of a lightly cooked biscuit, and her dark eyes were difficult to read, except when she was embarrassed. "How kind," said the old lady, with a grandeur that reminded Beth of Queen Elizabeth. In return, Miss Priscott held out an empty box from the previous week, and fortunately, the books did not seem to be on her mind, and she started talking about her great-nephew. Beth found it hard to get away without being rude. "He is 10 years old, and will pay me a visit this weekend," said Miss Priscott in her crisp-clipped tones. "It would mean a great deal to me if you could make his acquaintance. He has never before come to stay, and I have told him all about my kind young neighbour and her deliveries. Perhaps you might become playmates." Beth cringed inwardly. She didn't like the boys at her school, obsessed with football and playing their loud, boisterous games. Miss Priscott's nephew was probably the same, and she was sure he wouldn't want to become playmates with his aunt's kind young neighbour. How could she get out of it? "Sure," she mumbled, aiming for polite but vague, resolving not to mention the invitation to her parents. It would be much nicer to spend the weekend playing with Gravel and the new cat toy she had got for him. While Beth struggled with her cauliflower and Marmite omelette back at home, her mother asked, "Where's your cat? I haven't seen him all day." This wasn't unusual for Gravel, and her mum wasn't especially worried, but she liked to have an idea where he was, so that his sudden appearances didn't startle her. "He's not under my bed. I hope he comes back tonight. I wanted to play with him tomorrow," Beth replied. "Well, maybe you could find some human companions for a change," her mother said gently. "It might be good for you." Beth stayed quiet, hoping she'd drop the subject, but she went on. "What about Miss Priscott's nephew? I hear he's staying with her this weekend. It can't be much fun for a boy in that dark house with only an old lady for company. I'm sure he'd prefer someone his own age to play with. Beth was dismayed that her mother already knew. He isn't my own age. He's only 10, she protested, feeling 11 was a great deal older. But she knew that it was no good. Miss Priskett and her mother had caught her from both sides in a pincer movement, and Beth knew there would be no escape. To Beth, this was very unfair. Apparently it was fine for her parents to stay in at the weekends, with only each other and their books for company, but they were determined that she should make friends. She didn't need human friends, Beth told herself. She had gravel.